as I say, I haven't picked a fight with anybody. Everybody keeps on picking fights with me. And I'm sorry, I'm not some, dumb bimbo, oppressed woman. Right? Just because you become a housewife or a mother or anything like that does not mean you are oppressed or submissive. Well, and that is a very big mistake of all those who adhere to that. So this is, again, from White Trash, the 400-year untold history of class in America. Finish that. Just one passage there because it does relate to, we'll get into, it's Mary Cable, top drawer, American high society from the Gilded Age to the Roaring 20s. And that gets into the Gilded Age, ladies and gentlemen, and the changing of the guards, if you will, between the Quakers and Puritans and descendants of the early colonialist to the industrialist of the North. And this is just after World War, Civil War, 1877, this portion starts. So anyway, okay, from White Trash. For the most part, daily injustices in average people's lives go ignored, but that does not mean that poor people are numb to the conditions of their own lives. Politicians have been willfully blind to many social problems, pretending that America has grown rich as a largely classless society is bad history, to say the least. The 1% is the most recently adopted shorthand for moneyed monopoly, bringing attention to the ills generated by consolidated power. But the phenomena it describes is not new. Class separation is and has always been at the center of our political debates, despite every attempt to hide social reality with deceptive rhetoric. The white poor have been with us in various guises, as the names they have been given across the centuries attest. Waste people, off-scourings, lubbers, bog trotters, rascals, rubbish, squatters. I know that's what I'm being called right now. Crackers, clay eaters, tackies, mudsills, scalawags. Oh, I wonder where that name came from. Briar hoppers, hillbillies, lowdowners, white inward. I can't say it. Mom, while I grew up, that was never, we said in our house. Degenerates, white trash, rednecks, trailer trash, swamp people, swamp dwellers. Pretty appropriate. But these days it's white, brown, black, and yellow trash. They are blamed for living on bad land as though they had other choices. From the beginning, they existed in the minds of rural or urban elites and the middle class as extrusions of the weedy, unproductive soil. They are depicted as slothful, rootless, vagrants, physically scarred by their poverty. The worst ate clay and turned yellow, wallowed in mud and muck, and their necks became burned by the hot sun. Their poorly clothed, poorly fed children generated what others believed to be a permanent and defective breed. sexual deviancy. That comes from cramped quarters in obscure retreats, distant from civilization, where the moral vocabulary that dwells in town has been lost. We think of the left behind groups as extinct, and the present as a time of advanced thoughts and sensibility. But today's trailer trash are merely yesterday's vagrants on wheels, an updated version of Okies and jalopies and Florida crackers in their carts. They're renamed often, but they do not disappear. Our very identity as a nation, no matter what we tell ourselves, is intimately tied up with the dispossessed. We are then not only preoccupied with race, as we know we are, but with good and bad breeds as well. It is for good reason that we have this preoccupation by calling America not just a land of opportunity, but the land of opportunity. We collectively have made a promise to prosperity that there will always exist the real potential of self-propulsion upward. The land of opportunity. Well, why we had an exodus of Americans? Right now, well, last time I looked, but about 7 million Americans live abroad. Now, part of that, I mean, those are the ones who belong to the Federation of American Women's Clubs, that's the corporate diplomatic corps, ballpark, they're about 10% of the expatriates. Americans at 7 million, I think, and expatriates differ to an immigrant because normally expatriates don't have the intention of, permanently settling in another country, and usually they're of the 10% or kind of middle class or 10%ers that are moving, and not refugees, poor refugees fleeing countries, illiterate, and what we see a lot in the United States with your farm workers, the people who work in the domestic services or the restaurants, kitchen staff, busboys, things like that. So that it's different. However, I have had a case come to me that this was a Mexican. I wrote a letter to the Mexican consulate here in Madrid. It never went any farther. I think it was resolved. As I say, I do what I can with my limited resources, and see something, say something. Unfortunately, if I had an NGO and if I had a slew of people with brains and a little bit of knowledge of systems and the law and how to deal with this, then I could do a lot more, but I do what I can. So, why are we having an exodus of so many Americans from the country? Yeah, a lot of them, you have the retirees. Oh, I can live better in Belize on my retirement money than my sister's always saying, my younger sister, that she's going to retire and go to, some Central American place. These places are beautiful. And yes, they're very nice places to live. But I'm like, well, be careful, you retirees, because the way that the world is going, you might have all of your assets seized there and be expelled from the country. And if that's your equity, the home that you bought there, you're going to have to come back to the United States and you're going to have nothing. Same goes with, all of these corporate people who are, I mean, it's just they are predatory and exploitative, just like the other empires, as is the diplomatic corps of the American government that are in the embassies and the consulates and the international organizations. There's a variety of different things. So, yeah, all of these people are involved, but that is, as I say, a small portion of people moving from country to country to live abroad. Immigrants or expats. Both of them are my constituency. So it's quite a few million people. Then my other constituency are the women and children of the world. And I really get to town. I'll probably represent between those two groups. I got to cover at least 70%, 80% of the planet. Because I think women and children, women to men is about 50-50. But if you throw the kids in there on the women's rights issues against the men, we're the majority. See, we're considered a minority, but we're the majority. So white trash is essential, if disturbing thread in our national narrative. The very existence of such people, both in their visibility and invisibility, is proof that American society obsesses over the mutable labels we give to the neighbors we wish not to notice. They are not who we are, but they are who we are and have been a fundamental part of our history, whether we like it or not. So that's the closing of white trash. But again, this is a history professor at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. I mean, I'm much all over the map with Louisiana as I am with Spain, and I was born in New Orleans. That provides me standing as a Louisianan. Then I grew up in Arizona, so that provides me standing as an Arizonian. I got my American, my French, my Spanish, by virtue of the fact that my case is there and my children are Spanish. And the British, because the Wilcox beef with the British goes back over 500 years. So, pick your poison, people. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. I would love for it to be again, but that's not going to happen until I get my family back, which are my children. So from top drawer, American High Society. Gentlemen and ladies. So this is just a bit of a story about the May family to give you an idea of what the life was back. The first day of January 1977 dawned frigid and gray over New York City. On Wall Street, the stock exchange was as silent as nearby Trinity Churchyard, where the graves of once important merchants and businessmen lay under crusted snow. Above 59th Street, the Irish squatters who lived in shanties on the empty lots had sealed their windows and doors with newspapers and taken their goats inside with them. No ferries or small crafts plied the bridgeless waters of the East River or the Hudson. And as the Battery immigrants of Castle Garden would have to wait another day before venturing into the solid gold streets of New York. From the decks of newly arrived ships, they could see only the vague outlines of many tall buildings, some as tall as 7 stories. Isn't like 70 stories nowadays and more. But in the fashionable part of New York, in the brick row houses of Washington Square and the brownstone blocks that lined and flanked Fifth Avenue all the way to the 50s, gaslights were burning before dawn. At 21 West 19th Street, Dr. and Mrs. John Frederick May were in the dining room by 7:30, fortifying themselves with oatmeal and cream, steaks and potatoes, baked beans, griddle cakes, muffins and jam, and codfish tongues in black butter. I mean, unless you're working in the field, that's a hell of a lot of calories. And then some for I mean, that's the thing I love about workers, field hands, or people who do manual labor, men particularly. They come in and they're hungry. They get all this food and they eat it up, and they eat it up, and they actually enjoy it. Oh, give me a table of hungry men. I will make them happy. So Edith, the oldest, was engaged to a dashing English Guards officer, while the 2 younger ones were not out yet, and therefore not ready for the marriage market. Just now, the family attention was focused anxiously on the second sister, Caroline, who was being courted by a man of new wealth. Don't marry for money, but marry where money is. So I know that one. Was a favorite precept of Victorian mothers. Yeah. Queen Victoria, as I say, this goes back to, put it under here. My analysis, oh gosh, no, you can't see it well. The Camelot, Queen Victoria, Victorian era. And how actually after Albert's death, that's when the British Empire really became very oppressive. And I think she, it wasn't her because she opted out. It was in mourning. When you have a job like that, if you're queen, yes, you have feelings. I mean, she had been totally, not just pampered, but really her upbringing was dysfunctional. She wasn't allowed to walk down the stairs by herself. She slept, I think one of the things that she, imposed when she became queen was that she would not sleep in the same room as her mother. And she became queen very early, like 18, very early. I mean, you talk about a dysfunctional childhood and bringing up a little princess in a pea who doesn't know how to deal with even tying her own freaking shoes. No. I mean, I did it in antiquity when you had all of these corsets, my God, the things that they had to wear. Of course, you needed somebody to help you get dressed. God, you want to liberate women, you get. But that doesn't mean having everything hanging out. I love all of you men should watch what is it, Mel Gibson's movie about when he can read ladies' minds, and he's got a he, I mean, he has to do a market, he has to figure out how to sell some products. So he does all of this stuff and puts on ladies' clothes, sticks on a bra, tries to walk around in high heels. I wish every man would have to do that. I remember one time, one girl, I guess she had passed out at some party or something. And she said, no, I was okay. I still had my hose on. When I woke up, no man could ever get those things off and back on without ripping them. I was like, yeah, well, okay. I guess I have other ways to make sure that nothing happened, but I had to laugh. So where was I? But the question here was not should one marry where money is, but where good family background is not. My mom was obsessed over the freaking, but it wasn't the family, it was how much money they had. But yeah, are they from a good family? I'm like, wait a second. I've met some very, 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 hardworking, poor people. A more good family. A lot of the upper crust I know. So, good family background. Let's define that in the discussion, because I really would like a good definition. Because first, it's nebulous when everybody uses it. And second, if I try and define it, ooh, that's going to shut up. The Mays were a top drawer family, originally from Boston, where a great-grandfather had been one of the merchants who had chucked British tea into Boston Harbor. A rebel. Their branch had spread out to New York, Baltimore, and Washington, and had left behind the plain living and high thinking of their Boston cousins. In New York, it seemed one had to have more and more of everything: clothes, jewelry, carriages, servants, tickets to the opera, trips to Europe. Mrs. May often said wistfully that she could remember when the most exciting thing in a girl's life was a little supper dance at home with canvas put down over the carpet to dance on and favors of fresh nosegays. Nosegays, I'm not sure what that is. And boutonnieres. Only people we know were invited, and there was no ostentation. But now private dances were being given in public places, like the fashionable restaurant Delmonico's, and favors were likely to be real gold, charms, and stick pins. 2 years earlier, on the day after Christmas, 1874, the annual Patriarch's Ball, the most exclusive party of the year, had been held at Delmonico's. And the guest list had included at least a dozen persons who most of the others present had never met before. That occasion had come to be called the Bouncers' Ball. Bouncers being post-Civil War slang for a person who suddenly acquired a fortune. I think in the South, more commonly called carpetbaggers. Have to check on that one, but or maybe the carpetbaggers worked for these bouncers, because I'll get into that. Soon after 10, the May's first caller walked up the stoop wearing a sealskin coat down to his ankles. Young Alice, peering through the filmy curtains, explained, "Oh, Mama, it's Mr. Astor." Mrs. May was pleased to receive Mr. William Astor, but wished he had not come so early. That meant he was saving his later calls for households that he considered more important. The Mays were sure that they were more important than the Astors, at least as far as ancestry went. Still, better an Astor making an early call than a Vanderbilt, whose money, people said, was so recently acquired that when they walked by you, could hear the new bills crackling. Before Mr. Astor had departed, the street had suddenly become so crowded with carriages and sleighs that some of them could not get near the curb. Gentlemen came out of one house and went up the steps of the next. The families in this elegant section of the city, the magic parallelogram, as the New York Times called the area between 14th and 59th Street and between 3rd and 6th Avenues, were nearly all at the same social level and shared the same small circle of friends. Baked Virginia ham, scalloped oysters, and lobster salad drew the callers into the dining room. So did 2 punch bowls, one filled with eggnog and the other with a stupefying concoction of brandy, wine, and gin. Yeah, I'm allergic to gin. I've had 2 sips in my life, and I mean, if I'd had a whole gin, I'd ended up in the hospital. Really. I don't know what it is, but the girls and I don't have, no really other allergies. I mean, okay, so I'm not in my sinus, here in Washington, but nothing else. That the girls took turns pouring coffee or hot bouillon from silver samovars. Young bachelors lingered to chat with Julia and Alice, but Caroline was not so closely pursued. This was simply because word had gotten round New York that she was spoken for. And it was not good form to flirt with someone spoken for, even though no engagement had been formally announced. Well, I mean, there's no other way to describe Washington but Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm like, anytime a man gets near me, I'm like, yeah. My favorite is Juan Williams, author of one of these founding father books. And when he comes into Kalari, all he wants to know is the ring on my left hand finger, a wedding ring. And I'm trying to talk to him about the founding fathers. But, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of it. I'm an old lady. Okay? Been around the block too many times with those stories. Too many times with those type men. And that's all there. whores and pimps run this city. Okay, I forget where it was. The girls, let's see, young bachelors lingered to chat with Julia and Alice, but Caroline was not so closely. Okay. Caroline had been out for 3 seasons, and when people heard about the impending engagement, some of them meanly said, "It's about time." Or even, "How could she marry him? She must be desperate." Every woman out there likes to opine. And if they would spend a little bit more time tending to their own gardens, they wouldn't have so much to opine about in other people's gardens. I'm definitely live and let live, but I am live and let live if you are not violating the rights of somebody else who wants to live and let live. The suitor believed to have won the hand of Caroline May was James Gordon Bennett Jr. He was 15 years older than she, and definitely not out of the top drawer. He was known to be a heavy drinker, and he was rumored to be a roue. I'm not sure, rogue. But there was one thing about him that nobody could take exception to. On his father's death in 1873, he had inherited the country's most profitable newspaper, the New York Herald, along with a fortune of $7 million, which at the time was a breathtaking sum. So see, the frat house boys, the Kennedy kids, but so I had some respect for JFK and Bobby. Ted Kennedy was, this, because Joseph, the eldest, who was killed in World War II, karma. They support the rise of Hitler. His father supports he supports the rise of Hitler, and then he ends up going into World War II and getting killed pretty quickly. He had been raised to be the heir apparent, and JFK and Bobby, and this is what I like about being second daughter in my family. The eldest, I felt so horrible with my son because that came up. The eldest a lot of times. I think it's Joseph, Ethel and Bobby's eldest son, got left with that. That's why, the Hyannis Point terrorists, I have to give those kids a break in that whole thing. And if Hyannis Point and the Kennedy family had been a little bit more understanding to what those kids were living through and how their mother hung them out to dry, maybe their lives would have been a little bit different. Because that was not, that was heavy shit to deal with. I think he was like 17 years old, the eldest. As I say, I think his name is Joseph. So really, that's heavy shit to deal with. And having was there 11. So 10 younger siblings. Your mom can't deal. Well, deal, lady. You want to bring 11 children into this world. You want to grapple up the ladder of success. You know, you want to put yourself out there. Believe me, my older sister even said to me, aren't you afraid that someone's going to assassinate you? I'm like, well, yeah, sure. My problem with Ingrid Betancourt. She went back to Colombia after Galan was assassinated, calling to her country. Yeah, well, look how she hung out her country in the interim years. We need a real good look at what is class. But this Bennett guy, James Gordon Bennett, who is no fool either. He had sent Stanley looking for Livingston, thereby vastly increasing the sale and prestige of his newspaper. This gets into America, you know, something. The Stanley and Livingston, I'm going to have to Google that, but that rings a bell of Dr. Livingston, I presume. But this was a very famous historian and in American, you know, gossip history. In his personal life, he was given to flamboyance, eccentricity, and an arrogant disdain for what others might think or like. Now, this could be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I remember in 2007, my mother was like, you know, what do people think? I'm like, what do I care? I mean, that was always the go-to of my mother. My sisters and I would just, and my brother, we would roll our eyes. What would people think? I mean, with my family, I'm like, yeah, that's why you want to cover everything up. Spain and everything has happened in the past since I've been back in the United States, because what are gonna people think when they find out the truth? Not a pretty picture. It is what it is. People should never come to a high stakes poker game and crapshoot. He once rode his horse up the steps and into the elite precincts of the Newport Reading Room, where he had been blackballed in order to annoy the members. He was fond of sports, from the elite ones such as coaching, yachting, and polo, down to the cruel and degrading dog fights, cockfighting, and rat baiting. Oh, I don't even want to know what that is. When he was in town and wanted exercise, he used to ride a bicycle round and round the block where he lived, while his butler waited on the sidewalk to hand him a tot of brandy each time he went by. Isn't that what the Puritans had envisioned when they came over here, or the founding fathers? Toasting the new year and toasting the ladies in one house after another caused many gentlemen to become the worse for wear. Miss May's admirer was no exception. When he arrived at 21st West 19th Street in the late afternoon, he entered the front parlor, swaying visibly. His speech was slurred, and there was eggnog on his tie. And before many minutes passed, he did something that was to rock New York society. What he did, indeed, was so shocking that for 50 years or more, no respectable person ventured to describe it in print. Even a biographer of Bennett writing in the 1920s put it this way: there is no polite way of telling it. Victorians, however, were past masters of delicate indirection and veiled implications, and in no time, all but dunces knew what had occurred. But the only forthright account of the incident appeared some years later, written by an anonymous enemy of Bennett and his newspaper. It was in the form of a broadside, which was pasted on walls or handed out on the street to passerbys. Under the headline, James Gordon Bennett, most noted American example of human beast, the text read, responding to a liquid call of nature while in the presence of a lady of high character to whom he was paying attention, he simply retired behind the parlor door and let fly. Unusually decent of him in retiring thus far. Other versions of the story said that Bennett did not retire at all, but used the grate or an open grand piano. Whatever happened, it was generally agreed that Caroline fainted, her sisters fled the room, and Mrs. May began to shriek. The gentleman present, led by the girl's older brother, Frederick, seized the offender and threw him out onto the snow, which was now falling thickly. 2 days later, Frederick May waited for Bennett in front of the Union Club and attacked him with a horsewhip. Bennett then challenged young May to a duel, which was actually carried out and is believed to have been the last ever fought in America. Repairing with their seconds to a remote mud flat in Delaware, each shot and missed. Later, May said he missed on purpose. Bennett made no comment. Now, see, the dueling and you know, the pistols, that was done by congressional members. I've got another book out there on that whole thing of, you know, what was Washington and Congress, and the type of, I heard one of the congressional members said, oh no, in our orientation, we were like, well, guess what? In the olden days, they used to have duels and like beat each other up, bats, something on the congressional floor. So you guys are good to go. It's like, let's just keep putting the bar lower and lower and lower. Members of society were soon ready with a verdict. On one hand, Bennett was an unspeakable lout and should never again be received in decent New York households. Whether because of the New Year's Day incident or not, soon afterward, Bennett went to live in Europe and for the rest of his life visited New York only on business trips. Could you imagine somebody being totally ousted from society because they peed in a place that they weren't supposed to? Oh, the antics of the men have become so much worse than that. On the other hand, society people agreed that the Bennett affair simply showed what came of associating with bouncers and other people we don't know. The Mays had aired in a lot, this is where I'll get into, on the cave dweller of Washington, people we don't know. Yes, and there's been an influx of those for the past 70 or 100 years into this city that need to be ratted out and ousted. The Mays had erred in allowing a person like Bennett to court their daughter. It says Carolyn May later married a socially impeccable husband with the appropriate name of Mr. Wright. Her sister was left a widow by her English guardsman and later married the multimillionaire William C. Whitney. The Whitney family is, that's alumni of Foxcroft. So I'll have to look into this William C. Whitney a little bit more. And Frederick May had only made matters worse by creating a public scene, whereas the old guard was the dignified, homogeneous first circle of antebellum New York, which had been intensely private and all but closed to outsiders. Were the Citadel walls collapsing? As even to underline the crisis, the newspapers of the 3rd of January announced the death of Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt. Cornelia Guest. I'm pretty sure there's a connection with the Cornelius family there. I have to verify, but I'm pretty sure. See how it's all a very close circle of people. A man whom New York's elite had always considered vulgar and unattractive and had loved to snub. He left over $100 million, more money than had ever been amassed in America by one individual. And after a suitable period of mourning, his happy heirs began to spend it lavishly on parties, to which they persistently invited the old guard. One by one, and couple by couple, the old guard began to accept the invitations and to invite the Vanderbilts back. And in doing so, gave tacit recognition to the new age that had dawned. Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warren had already given a name to it in a novel they had written together in 1875. They called it The Gilded Age. Now, Mark Twain, for me, and I'm, an avid reader of American and English literature when I was growing up. After I had children, then it was Dr. Spock's book and Adele Davis on, healthy eating and preventative medicine, plus changing diapers. I didn't have much time to read any kind of literature or anything else at those times. But, and to even while I was I had the great professor of English literature at GW. Too much reading for my schedule, but really interesting man, and great. I loved the reading list that he gave us and the discussions, and it was one of my favorite classes. See, that's what is being an educated woman is about. Hell, my experience with algebra and geometry is similar to Einstein. And yeah, in the maths. I excelled, but it wasn't my interest and it wasn't my forte. It's been the social sciences, which is just as respectable, and you also need an analytical mind there. But the thing is, like Foxcroft, I'm trying to look, in its century of existence, Foxcroft has educated daughters of corporate titans and congressmen, including women from the Rockefeller, Carnegie, Mellon, and Astor family. But the Whitney family is in there as well. So, of course, Foxcroft old guard has ignored me. And the new guard, which is really factions of the African American Black Lives Matter groups. I mean, I saw a posting, I was like, no, because my response to the Black Lives Matter is all lives matter. That's what I'm fighting for. I'm not fighting for a supremacy of whites or blacks, browns, or yellows, or vice versa for any other group. I'm seeking equality and justice for all and equal opportunity. If you're a hard worker, I get on saying, "Ooh, the Einsteins of the world, please don't send me them. These pretentious Einsteins," because they are not Einsteins. I can sit down and talk to them for 5 minutes and tell you how pretentious and full of shit they are. Give me an honest hard worker who knows his strengths and his limits in life, just like I do, just like everybody should do, and work together. Except trying cream of the crop. So here's what's really interesting in this book. When we get in to the Mary Cable's analysis of or description of the Gilded Age, now we go into the old guard, the Quakers and the Puritans. From the days of the first settlers, America had its elite citizens. In Virginia, they were the gentry, the people who had plantations and slaves. In Philadelphia, they were the Quaker merchants who accumulated vast wealth, even while despising it. In New Amsterdam, the landholding patrons, that sounds so like, because my older sister's ex-husband is Dutch. It sounds so much like the Dutch and her ex-husband. It's not even funny. They what was it? Accumulate vast wealth. Well, that's all relative, while despising it. Oh. So in New England, there were no big landowners, but the descendants of the original colonists. That's not totally true. For example, Martha Washington, she, George Washington married rich there, because she was she didn't have to remarry. She was a landowner. She, was a businesswoman and a working woman. And I think his, when they got married, his estates, if you will, his wealth increased enormously. But the descendants of the original colonists they took an active part in the affairs of church, state, and commerce, were regularly regarded as better sort. Yes, who took an active part in the affairs of church, state, and commerce instead of hanging out in freaking country clubs, getting their nails done at the beauty parlor and the spas, looking for their next conquest while their husbands are in their office looking for their next conquest and bullshitting the country in the process. But none of these constituted a true aristocracy in the English and European sense, because from the very beginning, American society was fluid. All sons inherited equally, and equally they might either rise to great heights or squander their inheritance, sink to the bottom of hierarchy, and be replaced by brighter, luckily, or more industrious newcomers. That's what free trade is about, instead of these protection rackets. Ambitious and adventurous young men of all classes went west to seek their fortune, and on the frontier, social standing did not count. At least did not count until the women came. Women, said Mrs. John Kings van Rensselaer, a descendant of the patroons, brought society across the Atlantic, nurtured it, and made it their sphere. Colonial women were capable of a lot of hard work, and they were also in short supply. Two facts that caused men to treat them with deference. By the 19th century, women were no longer scarce and life was easier. But the frontier traditions, plus the Victorian fascination with chivalry and romance. There's romance in the beginning. Afterwards, reality from both sides. Now that doesn't mean you need to give up total romance, because you want to keep the sparks alive. That's important. But you know, everybody thinks this is a romantic thing till death do us part, with no bumps and problems. They're in for a bad ride. Impelled men to put their women on pedestals. A prosperous husband delighted in pampering his wife. Her luxury reflected his success, but she had to pay a price. She had to stay on her pedestal and not climb down or try any independent action. Certainly, she must not compete with him. Therefore, that abundant energy formerly expended on pioneering had to find an acceptable outlet. And one of these was to maintain and improve the family's social standing. Now, improve the family's social standing how? Hanging out in country clubs and wearing $2,000 shoes that anybody in their right mind wouldn't even put on, much less pay $2,000 for, or a purse, or, yeah. What do you consider maintain and improve the family's social standing? I have very different ideas about that. And even my time in Bogota, with all the, socialite games and appearances I had to do, it was not to schmooze and cruise. Just make the appearance. You got to do a part and two part. I mean, that comes with the territory. But if that's all you're about, you're a dumb bimbo that should be thrown out of the game. Thus, society became women's sphere, what always had been. A man who had aspirations toward power and prestige in his community needed a wife who knew the ropes and would not be trampled by her socially ambitious sister. See, it's important not to have dumb bimbos and your wives or your mistresses. Mrs. Van Rensselaer went on. Men of no social distinction have frequently become prominent in society by marrying women of breeding. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Belmonts, and other present leaders have attained their station through the infusion of aristocratic blood into their line through marriages with the old family. Their wives made them. The rule does not work both ways. Women of social standing may elevate obscure husbands to their own level, but men who marry beneath them usually sink to the standards of their wives. Huh, is that ever true? I mean, how many social climbing, women do I know who, married rich, married the meal ticket, and didn't step up to the plate, and just milked them and milked them and milked them. To accept the Astors was no great trauma for society people, no matter how blue-blooded, because one such family could be assimilated, or even two. The daughter of Admiral Oliver Hazard Perry married wealthy August Belmont, a German Jew who had translated his name into French from the German Schönberg. And together they took their places amongst the elite. The trouble began when, during the Civil War and in the decade after it, dozens of large fortunes were made, and not always according to the most scrupulous business ethics. Whereas in 1861, there were only 3 billionaires, Astor Vanderbilt and the merchant A.T. Stewart. By 1900, there were more than 4,000. 20 of them worth more than $75 million each. Many who made that kind of money were not gentlemen, nor were their socially ambitious wives anything like ladies. Our Best Society, a novel popular in the 1870s, gives an idea of the situation. It is peopled by such characters as Mr. and Mrs. GNU, Mr. and Mrs. Seton Down, Gauche Boozy, and Mr. and Mrs. Croesus. The name combines Croesus and Greece, Croesus, which the socially uncouth used to slick down their hair. Power ambition was not necessarily social ambition. The elder James Gordon Bennett, for example, spent all his time working to make the New York Herald the most widely read newspaper in the city. Not the most informative. One way was to print items about the comings and goings of the first circle, their balls, their attendance at the opera, their jaunts to Saratoga Springs, and so on, except in cases when a socialite was caught out in scandalous behavior. The Herald jottings were mild and inoffensive. Nevertheless, the privacy-craving bloods were continually outraged. The perversion of journalism starts there, and we see the product with cacophony, opining of journalists what the frick they're talking about. 50 years after the historic Bouncers Ball of 1874, at which the GNUs were included, we find Mrs. Van Reisenlauer still bitter about it. Social prominence, she wrote, as the city understood the term, was to be expressed henceforth in terms of millions rather than of lineage. She noted, however, that the social climbing was nothing new. The first climber to reach North America, she opined, had probably chosen New Amsterdam, knowing that he would find the best society there. Since the advent of that pioneer, she said, his tribe has increased with rodent-like rapidity. New York society's reaction to the onward march of the Bouncers was to close ranks behind the Mrs. Astor. She was needed to give shape and control to what had formerly just gone along by itself like a well-trained horse. It was she who in 1883 decided to be nice to the Vanderbilts, who knew money was now being spent by two Vanderbilt wives of good background. Mrs. K. Vanderbilt, Alva Smith, a Southern belle, and Mrs. Cornelius Vanderbilt II. Alice Gwen of old Cincinnati. A costume ball given by Mrs. Willie K. during the season of 1883 was the deciding factor. Mrs. Astor's daughter wanted to go, and therefore to open the way to invitations. Their mother bestowed social recognition on Alva Vanderbilt by calling her. When one season Mrs. Astor and her social consultant, Ward McAllister, made up the list for the Astor Annual Ball that became famous as the 400. The names on it, there were actually only 317 because some who were eligible were either out of town or in mourning, were understood to define New York social elite. Very few among them were recent comers. For Mrs. Astor and Mrs. McAllister chose slowly and with great care. They considered people's lineage, bank accounts, source of income, manners, looks, taste, reputation, and to a moderate degree, education. Charm was not a consideration. Neither was intellect. Yeah, well, we've seen the result of that. But there was something less definable, almost impossible to identify, that mattered more than anything. To be on Mrs. Astor's list, one had to be a gentleman or a lady. And these were mystic states that no parvenu was capable of. King James I is supposed to have told his old nurse when she asked him to make her son a gentleman. I think that must be his son. Must be a mistake. I can make him a lord, but I could never make him a gentleman. I'll have to check into King James verse a little bit. So, what then makes a gentleman? First, it would seem to be a matter of certain moral principles. which are not learned, not adopted, but are an inborn part of a man and give him quality. Don't agree totally. This is nurture nature discussion. Both are important. I mean, yeah, I think I can come up with enough examples that people with an innate sense of justice, and they suffer, you know, they don't sell out. However, those, and that's where it comes in important, those who don't have that innate, if they're properly guided and you know, because they do have other qualities, it can become moral. And because you know, you look at this with children, or even with, you know, serial killers and all children, they want to please. They just act up because, you know, it's a dysfunctional, you know, that's how they're reacting. And that's where it's the job of the parents and the educators to guide them and show, well, yeah, you're upset about this, or there's this or that. This is the way that you have to deal with it. I mean, that's not something that Homo sapiens are born with. That's why we have such a, I mean, we are, I think, the animal with the, you know, who takes care of and keeps their young with them, even if our most primitive states, longer than any other animal. And we transmit lots of stuff over those years. And of course, the first is the basic, is potty training. You know, like everything has its time. Louis Auchincloss has defined this quality as having to do with obedience to the unenforceable, a phrase he credits to the English jurist Lord Moulton. Honor, noblesse, oblige, integrity, and forbearance are among these unenforceable principles. In the antebellum South, many a gentleman was cheated out of his fortune because he did not get agreements on paper. He had been brought up to believe that a gentleman's word or handshake was binding. But the outside world turned out to be full of ungentlemanly people. So see, that, you know, this whole thing about the South and the North, good and bad, is just propaganda and faulty rhetoric. Most observers agreed with James I that there could be no such thing as an instant gentleman. The poet and Boston blue blood, Oliver Wendell Holmes, it was he who christened Boston's upper class the Brahmins, speculated that a gentleman was a distinct physiological type developed over at least 4 or 5 generations of family traditions and culture. 4 or 5. Most agreed that money and snobbish ways did not make a gentleman, and neither did clothes, which should be right, but not attention-getting. Thackeray once suggested using a watering pot on new hats to remove the gloss. The English diplomat James Bryce, who spent some time in this country during the 1880s and 90s, noted that the American social grades and distinctions were sometimes drawn as sharp as in Europe. He wrote the nature of a man's occupation, his education, his manners and breeding, his income, his connections, all coming into view in determining whether he is, in this narrow sense, the word a gentleman, almost as they would be in England, though in most parts of the United States, personal qualities count for rather more than in England, and occupation for rather less. And so it would seem that in those unenforceable personal qualities that in the aggregate form character, what most clearly distinguished an American gentleman of the period we are talking about. Besides those qualities are already mentioned, there are plenty of others. Let's see. In Praise of Gentlemen, 1935, he counted style as a highly gentleman trait. We have style in horse, dogs, flowers, and architecture, so why not in human beings? It took, of course, generations. This is, okay. A novel called It's Not Done by William C. Bullitt, a Philadelphian, despite he was ambassador to the USSR and later to France under FDR. Telling his adolescent son, John, his ideas about Walt Whitman. He just doesn't understand people like ourselves. He's kind and open-hearted himself, so he can't realize that people who haven't family behind them must be very rich and secure, indeed, before they will be decent. He has a feeling of noblesse oblige just out of his own body. What's that? You wouldn't steal or be mean or cruel, would you? No. Why? Just because. Because of what? Well, you wouldn't, Father. Neither would any of us. And we wouldn't because we're Corsies. And Corsies don't do that sort of thing, no matter how hard pressed they are. We may break, but we don't bend. See, you wouldn't steal or be mean or cruel, would you? It's the values and that are transmitted from one generation to another. And sometimes you have conflicting. My mother totally, and that's the Catholic influence and the con artist versus my father. I followed the path of my father. My siblings embraced the path of my mother. The gentleman's counterpart, the lady, had an even more exacting role to carry out. She shared most of his good points: integrity, noblesse oblige, and the rest. But she also needed a quality the Victorians like to call purity. The word had to do with innocence of sex. Well, Queen Victoria, I mean, she enjoyed sex. I mean, that's why she had so many kids, and she wasn't very happy about that. She was like, ooh, Albert, She had a good time. An unmarried girl knew nothing about it, and a married one wished she didn't. But it went beyond that. A pure woman was like a crystal clear pool, quiet, cool, uncontaminated, life-giving. No wind could disturb her deep serenity. She was always calm and collected. The hysterical prima donnas we got out there, that don't fit the bill. She did not sweat. I'm thinking of Prince Andrew. It's, Prince Andrew maybe give some lessons on not sweating. And maybe that's not such a good thing in life. The poor man, and I can imagine it was scared shitless when they started firing on him and tried to kill him. That was the Falkland Islands, and I guess it, messed up, and he got a problem. Sweating is important. If you can't sweat, see, the sweating is the body is a natural cooling system. So Prince Andrew maybe can debunk that. She had a form, not a body, a bosom, not two breasts. And below the waist, as far as she was concerned, she had only frilly white petticoats. To be with her quieted the hot, hasty, sweaty man. Even a gentleman became agitated when out in the rough world, so that he felt soothed and refreshed and ready to undertake anything on her behalf. A lady must not talk loudly, run, or gesticulate, must not argue, contradict, or show anger, or do anything out of the ordinary, such as dressing in an avant-garde manner or dancing new dances. Avant-garde manner and dancing new dances, they're doing it all over the place, but you're still not supposed to show anger or contradict or argue. Yeah, see, this is a pretty screwed up image of what a real lady is about. No matter how capable she might be, she must seem helpless. And no matter how intelligent and well-educated, she must not be thought intellectual. Oh Lord, has that been my problem my entire life? On the other hand, she was expected to manage a great household with the skill of a commanding general and speak French and German fluently. Well, French and Spanish, sorry, my German's non-existent. Enough to be seated beside princes and ambassadors and think of things to say through 3-hour dinners. I had no problem with that. It's just all of the princes and ambassadors who are sitting next to me who don't have a freaking brain that are problematic. Oh, I've been rubbing my shoulders with these guys all my life, and they're all a bunch of, frat boys. Just trying to live the Gilded Age, the golden age, cash in. In the face of misfortune, she must be stoic and uncomplaining. In the Gilded Age, fortunes were often made and lost with disconcerting suddenness, but a lady would carry on as serenely and charmingly on boiled tripes as she did on filet mignon. Now, this I agree with. Keep on saying, even if you get me living on in a tent on the streets, I will still be a lady, because it has nothing to do with the trappings around me, the house I live in, clothes I wear, or anything like that. It was integrity, noblesse oblige. What was it with the men? And forbearance. Is what a lady and a gentleman are about. If her husband philandered, she must appear not to notice. And then everyone and her husband, including her husband, would admire her purity all the more. her husband philanders or gets involved in immoral or illegal activity, see, that's where we got a big divide. No, a lady, she has as much obligation to her country and being an upstanding citizen. And it is a difficult situation when it's a family member, particularly your husband. However, there is a moment of truth of, okay, because sure, you can't make a federal case out of everything in life, but there, being a real lady means knowing where that line is drawn. So there's a little bit more here, but I'm getting tired. Because this goes into I'll get into this. This gets into the power. Once the power hungry has achieved social status, the next trick was to keep the arrangement going. Sons and daughters must not marry into any other group. And although it was contrary to American tradition to arrange marriages, the elite accomplished the next thing to it by making sure their children did not meet anyone unsuitable. On the great principle that it is almost as great a thing to be an ancestor as to have an ancestor, they set out to found dynasties. Vanderbilts married Whitneys, Cabots married Lowells, Rockefellers married McCormicks. That's a big spice thing. Children were of great importance to the power elite as a means of keeping the money and increasing it. Okay, I'll leave it at there because that is gives the synopsis. But see, it's and the prep schools, the East Coast prep schools and Ivy League colleges have just been a tool, an instrument in this, changing of the guard, changing of power, and then restricting it within the new aristocracy. This is, you see all of the IMF, World Bank, UN, because their children, I mean, not all of them are expats, but a large portion are. Their children and their spouses get tuition reimbursement. They go to the prep schools, the expensive prep schools, and international schools, which gets them entry into the Ivy League colleges, their spouses, and even, I mean, I think there's a cap, like on who, I think it's only offspring and spouses, cousins thing going, get the whole freaking family here on taxpayers' money and get them all of these diplomas. So, and I mean, the wives who are accumulating these diplomas, I'm not going to do anything with, like Mark Lewis and Yasmin Lewis, she's Turkish. But I'm pretty sure born here. So maybe second or third generation Turkish, but it just goes to show you how these, new immigrants that are coming in more recently, in the past few decades, or 100 years ago or 50 years ago, they're just here to cash in. And really, and the country be damned, and democracy be damned, and they feel no obligation towards see something, say something, and you have a part in upholding the principles of the country and the law of order and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I mean, they keep on telling me it is what it is. If you don't like it, leave. I'm like, excuse me, this is my country. You might get away with that in your own country, but I'll argue that you are a constitution and you are acting to subvert your constitution and the rule of law and incite violence and civil unrest. So I'll even argue on that point there. But particularly when it's my own country and you're a foreigner. I mean, maybe recently Iran don't even have an American citizenship, which in a way gives you a little bit more free pass than the ones who do have American citizenship. I really got a problem with them. Yeah, well, if your loyalty is not to the country and its constitution, then I have to agree, pack up and go home. And if you say, but wait a second, I no longer a citizenship there, I'll be a stateless, rightsless person. My response would be, well, guess what? That's what you've turned women and children into. That's what you turned me into. You established the rules of the game, and now you're going to complain about the rules that you established? Now, I don't believe anybody should be a stateless or rightsless person. So I'm not going to promote that. That's revenge. However, I do want all of these, immigrants in this country, whether they be, expats without an American citizenship or, second, third, fourth, fifth generation immigrants, if you're contributing to bringing this country into another civil war, that this won't be divided between the whites, the Southern gentlemen and the Southern agrarians and the industrial South, the industrial North, and the lines will be a little bit differently divided, and we'll have different white, browns, blacks, and yellows in there rather than mainly whites, few blacks. In the first Civil War, doesn't work for me. Like, it is what it is. It doesn't work for me. And I won't accept that it is what it is. And I want to see all of you in court. I don't want to see anybody on a battlefield. I wouldn't have a chance in hell on there. And I know it. But I can argue in court. I can argue in Congress. I can argue in parliamentary debate. That I'll chew you up and spit you out, and you there you are gonna lose. Yeah, if you get me on a battlefield and try and get out fighting, now I'll be like, no, I'm not doing this. I'll lose. So let me talk to your general. Tell him to come out here, and I'll tell him I'm not fighting you guys. You want to throw me in the brig, you throw me in the brig. You want to shoot me in the head, you shoot me in the head. But I won't take up arms, and we can sit down for a little powwow, maybe Indian pipe there. And I can finally explain it to you, which I've been trying to explain to all the people that you're protecting for the past 15 years. I mean, General Milley, that was my letter to him, going, buddy, you are at the head of security forces, technically the military, but I throw in the police in there and all of the security detail, public and private. Only place I can go higher up than you is well, the president, I already, he's the chief, commander in chief. Yeah, I've already been there, done that with the Obama administration. The Trump administration got in, and now we're at the Biden administration. So obviously that avenue is not working. The only place I can bug it up to is God, and he's already on my side. So, you want me to go talk to somebody else, you tell me who it is. I've been laying my bricks, unlike the other little piggies in the game. Where's my where's my one on that one? Hold on. I want to pull that one. Because say all of you little guys who failed to graduate from kindergarten, see what happens. This is stuff you should learn when you're a kid. You lay your foundations. When the wolf comes, you can't blow your house away. Now, you can party hardy and have a big, big wooden house. Looks all fancy, real nice. You can blow that one away as well. And the straw one that was put together real quick by another party hardier who wants to pretend that she's Wonder Woman. See the party hardiers. You want to dress the part, but you also have substance and play the part. So anyway, when the wolf comes to blow that little house down, lady, that goes even faster than the wooden one. See why it's important to lay your foundations in life, whatever job you're doing, your personal life or your professional life, private or public, you can call them whatever you want. And that's what being a lady and a gentleman is really about. It's not the trappings. It's not the pomp and circumstance. It's not the jewelry and the you want to dress the part, of course. You go to a picnic, you don't wear a gala dinner dress. But if you go to a gala dinner, you don't wear jeans. These traditions, these customs, these social norms of women, there is an importance to them, but they have to be, setting the ones who set the standards, who guide the society, not the Mrs. Astor. Women with substance and integrity and respect for themselves as well as others. And so I guess on that note, finish Thanksgiving. As I say, it really saddens me to see what Thanksgiving has become in this country, because it used to be the only holiday that was left, which was about getting together with your loved ones and sitting down, sharing a meal. I mean, not at some restaurant. Restaurants used to not be open for Thanksgiving because we wouldn't have any clientele. I was in college, we would close for Thanksgiving because nobody would come in. Or at least, we'd close really, really early. I think we weren't even open. Now I want to force feed you a 7-course meal for $150 or whatever. I mean, okay, don't get me started on the restaurant industry. But yeah, a lot of things need to change in this country, and all little socialite women, social climbing women, foreign and domestic, and terrorist cells. These are the terrorist cells under domestic violence extremist report of Biden that threaten America. I was like, yeah, okay. Attorney General Garland and FBI Director Wray, here are the names. Investigation yesterday. And run these little bitches and their pimps out of town. Drain them from the frickin' swamp. You have the evidence. I've established cause. I've provided you with the evidence. I've provided you with all the names and everyone who is protecting them and all the little protection rackets going on in this little city. Now move your asses. No, I'm like, okay, join the bandwagon. I'm going to be holding you in the courts. RICO, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the Patriot Act. You are notified. I said, investigate. You ignore me, you become complicit. You become another actor who is complicit. Which, when you get into, look at Glenn, what's his name? Glenn Kirshner. Yeah, well, he makes a lot of points, but he should look in the mirror. And take a real hard look at his country instead of living in his little la la land. And how a lot of what he's saying could be used against him and all of his little friends. They make a lot of good points. But as they say, he needs to look in the mirror, and he needs to look in the mirror of a lot of his little friends. Hypocrisy in this country and amongst the ruling elite. I mean, it's not just this country. I left looking greener pastures. Looking for greener pastures, they're nowhere to be found. Pastures are no greener on the other side of the fence. We got to tend our own pastures first. Unfortunately, my pastors are all over Europe and the United States by this time, in the Americas. So yeah, my adversaries really should start doing your homework. Because I won't give up. When I finally get you all into the courtroom, the day of reckoning comes, I just keep on, okay, I'm not going to let you incite me to violence and to flip out like everybody wants me to do. It's what you got to do. There's the evidence. I want to do it. Okay, we'll play it that way. Get on the, choo-choo train. Just get on the choo-choo train. See, I was brought up in the boot camp of the bitches of this world and taught from a very young age that I let them make me angry and start pulling their hair. Which is, is the go-to for girls rather than punching somebody, slapping them or pulling their hair rather than punch them in the nose. I get in trouble. So and believe me, my sisters are my siblings are just, and my mother. I mean, if they can't push my buttons, all the people that I don't even know and couldn't give a shit about, you're not going to succeed. And I'll just keep racking up the evidence going, see, they're the ones who are inciting violence by their condescending bitchery and not doing their jobs and taking taxpayers and the country for a ride and going nah, 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 at the same time. Of course, people are getting pissed off. I mean, you got to be lobotomized or on some wacko pharmaceutical drugs that are doping you into zonked out to not get pissed off or to not react. This whole Victorian stuff of show no emotions, that's got to go. I mean, the British, there is a certain thing of stiff upper lip. Don't become hysterical. Like the Southern Europeans, you know, Spanish women. The hysterical ones are horrible, but there is another side. Like my ex-husband's maternal grandmother. I mean, that was a lady. She was semi-illiterate, highly uneducated, but a lady. Because she didn't go around stabbing people in the back. She was a simple woman, but honest and loving. That's more important than any finery and all the mansions and all the yachts that you can pull out there. So that's what Thanksgiving, yeah, should be about. So have a nice day and happy Thanksgiving.